Hey, welcome to the Nimby War Room. I'm your host, Patrick Slevin. I'm here on the road in Amarillo, Texas for an open house tonight for a project. And this is going to be a hybrid of War Room and on the road Nimby tips. The War Room, I'm still experimenting with it, and I'm just going to do this one take. And if it takes, great. If not, well, give it a try. I just want to riff on this NIMBY new rules, as you saw in the title, or at least on the thumbnail, and what that really means, and how is that significant for your future success and current success too, as a developer, land consultant, public affairs pro, and everything else in between, right? So before I talk about the new rules, let's make sure we understand what the current rules are. And the current rules are based on the archaic notice and hearing process, right? For decades, developers and professionals have focused in on this legal, logical, and what I'll even call linear / predictable legal process. And it was predicated on citizen participation with its public hearings and recommendations from non-binary organizations such as planning and zoning. But it really has failed, especially since the advent of the digital age, where the grapevine, coupled with developers staying with conventional thinking, flying under the radar, not doing any kind of outreach or any at least significant outreach in the public square, has just caused this repetitive pattern of NIMBYism. And so to understand the new rule, I would just say the old rule is benefiting the NIMBY playbook. And I'll give you a secret that I really haven't talked about up until this point, and I'll share with you for checking me out on this very raw shot of the war room is, basically uh, the playbook understands, the NIMBY playbook relies upon the developer to have these blinders, being so fixated on the application process and getting those facts out that they are more successful than not in exploiting the conventional thinking that's predicated on these old rules. And and so what I'm about to tell you is that over half the projects that we see in any given week that's delayed or defeated by NIMBY opposition, I'm here to tell you that it's not the opposition that defeated these projects or had these negative impacts. It's the corporations, it's the developers that have had these miscues, missteps, and mistakes that allow the opposition, which is really for the most part just upstarts, right? They're upstart advocates that are savvy enough to put a Facebook page together and then call in other opponents from across the country via the internet and get these templates and these playbooks to use against the applicant, we'll call them right now. And so that's really the gist here. It's like you have control over the fate of your project more than you've ever really looked at. And so the new rules are understanding, first and foremost, that the legal, logical, and the linear predictability of the notice and hearing process is not serving your best interest. Because the new rules have to focus on that political, emotional, and I would say situational components that we see in every battle across the country. Because at the end of the day, we all know politics trumps the legal every time. Because you have elected officials who are worried about getting reelected, right? And 50 people, 100 people showing up at City Hall scares the bejesus out of them. And so it's just not a sustainable type of practice in today's day and age. So you need to have new rules that now exploit that political, emotional, situational awareness that's available to you. And so I just want to spend a few minutes on what that looks like. Uh, and frankly, there's not that many people talking about this aspect of the applicant, the corporate executives and developers um, being part of the NIMBY problem, whether they realize it or not. But the good news is they're part of the solution, right? But you have a lot of public affairs, PR pros, lobbyists, they're just focused on, let's just go and start from square one and start a campaign, which is a good idea. Do a grassroots outreach engagement, do your coffees, do a landing page, have your own Facebook page, maybe a coalition. All those things are well and good, but it's incomplete. It's still predicated on fighting under the old rules of engagement. So in other words, the chessboard is really a checkers board when you're trying to play chess. And so let me then flip the coin here. And so what are we talking about? When I come onto a project and work with a client, part of what I bring to the table, yes, is a campaign plan and doing all this outreach, but that's really tactical stuff. The strategy, which everyone likes to talk about, but really no one accomplishes, is what is the corporate reputation? What are the best practices or lack thereof that bring these projects to these localities? And most of the NIMBY conflicts that I'm called in to mitigate and overcome, a lot of them just, once again, under the old rules, are the catalyst is actually the developer themselves. By a lack of engagement, by not going to local influencers, not meeting and briefing with the reporter, or engaging those community intersections, the proverbial barbershops, to really get out ahead of the expected misinformation campaign that's going to be the NIMBYism. And so it comes down to a mindset, a different attitude that underwrites these new rules of engagement. You can have all the rules you want, but if you still have a conventional thinking where you have the blind spots, or sometimes even the hubris, because a lot of success will create blind spots, like, hey, I've gotten so much success, why do I need to engage and expose myself to opposition unnecessarily, right? And that's reasonable. However, in today's day and age, uh, the mentality, this mindset is you should expect the unexpected. You should expect NIMBYism to rise up against your project, and be surprised if it doesn't. And by having that kind of paradigm shift or mindset, you're going to do better practices, and you're going to have a strategy in place to where you're minimizing that target that's going to be coming on the back of your project, and you're going to minimize the missteps and mistakes and miscues, and so that's really the rub here. And how the new rules is very simple, at least for me, and how I work with my clients over the last 3 or 4 decades now, is I have what's called my bar code. You got to have a code, right? We all have a code in how we live personally and professionally. And mine, and how I translate that into underwriting strategies for success in the NIMBY space, is you got to be bold, you got to be audacious, and you have to be resilient. Those three aspects of the bar code is essential. They're intangible, but they're very important, because the what I love about developers and working in this space is there's an entrepreneurial, innovative type of energy that comes into every project. But for some reason, it peters off or dissipates when we get to this communications and engagement element, to ensure that you're proactively preempting expected community resistance. So harness that with this barcode or whatever you want to use. But for me, and what I've written in my free ebook, which is in the description here, The Art of NIMBY Warfare, is I really do break down what's bold, what's audacious, and resilient. And bold is, go big or go home, right? Basically, you got to think outside. Um, you got to think outside the current notice and hearing um, construct. And what can you do to put your project in a stronger position? One example would be, how do you humanize a site plan? How do you humanize buildings and capture that emotional component of the political, emotional, and situational awareness? Very simply for me is video communications, testimonials of employees, landowners, property owners, EDC folks, boosters, your civic organizations, nonprofits, board members from them. There's a whole slew of folks that you can now put a face on your project just by virtue of video communications and slapping it on a landing page or a project website. So that's being bold, thinking like, how do I turn this two-dimensional project that's easy to attack and to demonize into a three-dimensional educational piece for the stakeholders that you're targeting, primarily the elected officials, right? At the end of the day, you need the votes, and it all funnels down to giving them the political confidence and capital of your outreach engagement. The second is being audacious. That's just simply thinking outside the box, where you're just going to take some chances, not be as risk averse, understanding if you do nothing, your chances of getting Nimby resistance and defeat is pretty high. So by being proactive and trying to be more innovative, you'll go ahead and you'll do some things that you may have not have done before, like direct mail, texting. Texting is very big. Door knocking is still a good one. I door knock all over the country. It's very effective. So, and if that's making you feel uncomfortable, like you'll never do that, then this is a good test for you right here on whether or not the new rules are rubbing you right, or you still holding on to the old construct that really is set up for failure and higher risk of NIMBYism. And finally, resilience. I do a lot of endurance, ultra marathons, mountain races, some death races when I was a little younger and a little healthier. And it comes down to overcoming the fear of failure. There's a fear of change already out there. There's a fear of uncertainty. But ironically, with the entrepreneurial, innovative spirit that does come from developers, there's this fear of failure. If you try something new or something that's bold, that's going to make waves, uh, you step back. The new rules demand that you have to have some resilience. There'll be some. Not everything's going to be successful, but my philosophy is I'd rather take action and it didn't work out versus I sat on my hands and it certainly didn't work out. At least you take a chance, a calculated risk reward type of strategy. And so when you combine those three elements and you have this bar, you have a code that's going to give you more yes in my backyard wins. There's no doubt. I see it all the time. Just a little change in your mental mindset here underwrites a strategy that the opposition's playbook is not accounting for. And that's the key here. That's the big key. They're expecting you to just go in there with the land use lawyer and pontificate the benefits of the project right there at the podium in a hearing, and you're just going to get sandbagged, right? There's a saying, in the U.S. Senate, they don't call a vote until they know how the vote's going to be. And with the new rules of engagement, you should be able to have a higher degree of confidence and efficacy as to how that vote's going to be, because there's always one or two officials running for re-election, or they want to be the next tier at the state or congressional level or county, whatever. And so by having these new rules of engagement with the barcode, with an eye towards understanding that half the projects that are out there are defeated because of not the NIMBY playbook, but because of a lack of strategy by the applicant, you're able to significantly reduce the risk of maybe not the NIMBYism, but certainly the impact, the political chaos that the NIMBY creates. Because they're going to do everything they can to create that chaos, right? But if you're out in front of that, you can definitely take some of the oxygen out of their campaign while you're building up yours. And so that's really it here for the war room, just to give you some food for thought. And if you're comfortable, that means you're really not doing enough for your project. There should always be this little uncomfortability in making, in doing this component, because let's face it, it's in the public square. It's very politically charged. The media is covering it, and it's just, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. And if it was easy, there'd be 100 of me, talking on video with you right here and having a conversation. So if you liked this video, if you thought it was helpful, I'd appreciate you hitting like and sharing it with your colleagues. If you're not a subscriber, go ahead and hit subscribe. Check out the description. I got a couple freebies in there. Sign up for my War Room newsletter if you haven't already, and you can get that free ebook as well. So thanks for spending some time with me here in Amarillo. I'm going to now get ready for my community briefing, and we got people coming, and we're ready to engage, and never look back, always looking forward. See you next time.